it is understood that there will be some concerns with regard to the citizenry and, of course, their communities. But what I would like is to also advise that the ZOSO, which is the Zone of Special Operations, in some jurisdictions known as zonal curfews, is an applicable tool for crime reduction and crime suppression, but it's not the only tool, as we would probably discuss later on. And yes, there was a working model in Jamaica, and as I said in another place today, a working model also out of LATAM, in Latin America. It is going to involve a lot of moving parts outside of the legislation, which gives it the enforcement and the coverage of law so as to implement. However, the key issue, one of the key issues is based on the question that is asked. Is my community going to be labeled, entitled, or indicated of as being a hot zone or an area where we will have a zone of special operations? And if so, how are you going to determine that? Hence the reason why I would have said it must also involve an in-depth joint intelligence-led sort of what we will call an evaluation or assessment that will have all of the indicators as to this specific community based on its crime, its criminality, the criminals or the known criminals who may be residing in this specific area has been identified as a zone of special operations, to which there will now be a concentrated effort, to which now there will be an intensified effort. Because in zone of special operations, one thing that must be clear and should be communicated clearly, and it's hopeful that that sort of communication will also reach the ground, that there will be disruptions. There will be some interruptions to normal activity, but all of this must be sold and communicated positively as a move and an effort so as to restore not only this specific area, but by whole Trinidad and Tobago to a semblance of safety and security. And what is also very important, allow me to share, is that this does not mean that the state of emergency is finished and the only area where there will be some sort of intensified effort or special focus or concentrated effort, as I would have said earlier, is the areas that have been designated zones of special operations. It is advised that there will continue to be high visibility of patrols of law enforcement operations, and of course the joint, what is known as the joint agency approach, both for intelligence and for operations and other aspects of Trinidad and Tobago. So it's an effort that involves a collective and collaborative approach outside of the intelligence-led identifying of the special zones.
Mr. Heerah, do you have any advice for the citizens? Because this is now being debate as we speak, and we have seen online there are already people with all these concerns, and then we are seeing one of the MPs in a so-called hotspot area indicating that based on 2013 data, he says, on what basis would they label communities hotspots? This data is 2013. We are now in 2026, so I'm not sure a lot has changed. So what advice would you give?
No, a lot has changed based on the type of crime and the extent or what we'll call the severity of crime in country. My advice really to the citizenry is to look at the stats and look at the data that during the time of the SOE, there have been some reductions, some significant reductions. There are indicators that there have been some crime suppression. There have been arrests. There have been seizures. So it spells or it indicates that with the SOE and to the escalated vigilance that was exercised by law enforcement, there have been some results. And therefore, for us to have a sustenance and continuance of such efforts, such results, then we need to ensure that we keep our fingers on the button. We need to ensure that we could maintain this sort of law enforcement thrust so as to ensure that we have the results. But people will be concerned, especially from their communities, and we must have a viewpoint on the bigger picture, because Trinidad and Tobago needs to be restored. We need to stamp out the crime that has been plaguing us, and in some instances, forcing us to feel crippled and confined in your own homes, in your own recreational intentionalities, and of course, even your socializing. People have been placed in a corner. People are no longer going out there. Businesses are closing earlier. We want to come back with a mindset that Trinidad and Tobago is safe again. So this leads me now to start the conversation with regard to law enforcement and our TTPS. And they must also understand on the exercising of discretion, working with the public, and of course, ensuring that your role and function is to protect and serve, but more importantly, enforce the law. And it should not be a targeting aspect where everyone feels the full brunt of the law. You should have your targeting aspect as to who are the known criminals, what are your targets, and how you're going to strategically go at them and avoid having to disrupt with too much disruption the law abiding citizens. We are expecting some disruption, and this is where the advice to our citizenry is that you have to cooperate with law enforcement during exercises and during times like what is being identified as the ZOSO. And under these harsh conditions, we have to expect disruptions, and we also have to cooperate with law enforcement to make it easier within that sort of exchange, that connectivity when you are being, when you have that interface with law enforcement. Further to that, law enforcement also has to exercise discretion and to work with the public. We have entrusted with you, guys, as our gatekeepers, as the gatekeepers of peace and law enforcement, to keep us safe and to keep us secured. But that does not give you an excuse to take advantage of law-abiding citizens. So it's very important that our law enforcement officers or law enforcement agencies, including the TTPS, the Defense Force, all who are going to be working together, their approach to the citizenry is one to work with them and the citizenry to be able to cooperate with law enforcement so that at the end of the day, we can restore Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. Heerah, final question. Mr. Heerah, given your wealth of experience, is this a step in the right direction? Would you say?
I think it's a step in the right direction. It is not the only step that we need to rely on and throw all our eggs in the basket, but it's a good move in replacing, or as we say now, for business continuity of law enforcement. If the SOE comes to an end, it is a good opportunity to maintain that escalated vigilance and sustaining the operations of law enforcement for crime reduction, crime suppression. However, its successability will depend on a number of things, because we also cannot turn a blind eye to our border control management, as was advised, because if narcotics and illegal migrants and illegal arms continue to flow into the country, in a way where there are very limited restrictions or limited stoppages and seizures, it will only make a bad matter worse. So focus has to also be on border control management during this time. The SOE is coming to a close, and we're looking at the zones of special operations. We need to also be focusing on border control management in tandem. In addition to that, to make it the efficacy of a proper zone of special operations is also the establishment of mobile command centers that can have high visibility, a presence, a faster response, and of course have that overwatch over certain communities and individuals. So the government or the decision makers should also consider investing in some modern command centers, mobile command centers that are modern in its infrastructure and its technology, and they can be situated into these special zones so as to make that sort of command and control, more so the coordination, a lot easier on the hands of the actors of the state.
Yes, Mr. Heerah, earlier on you mentioned that it's being done with information intelligence driven. We have seen where things have changed with certain security agencies, where they have given more broader powers to do more investigation and so on, like the SSA and so on, or their powers are increased and so on. But from a layperson's perspective, they keep saying that information is not evidence, but the government have the information because you have so many different branches. You have the army have intelligence, you have the police have special branch and different intelligence gathering apparatus within, and then you have the SSA, and all of this information is coming in, but we are not seeing it impacting the society. All this money being spent on equipment, manpower, training, and you're not even seeing a buy and bust from special branch. What is going on?
Yeah, and I think your argument is in good stead in that if we were to equate the amount of money that has been spent or released to national security over the years, over the last 5 years, whatever, were we or are we seeing the results? Now, we have seen some results, but is it weighing on equity with regard to the effort and the funding? Because at the end of the day, this is the purse of the citizens. This is the nation's purse. And if we're giving a certain amount of money, we're expecting a certain type of result. I would have advised further to this conversation that a new approach needs to be taken, for instance, with regard to law enforcement. And I am strong an advocate that we need to see short, medium, and long-term goals also being applied now to the ZOSOs, to the zones of special operations, to the enforcement, to the escalated operations that we would be seeing, the high visibility between now and the next 6 months to a year. And if we look at the short, medium, and long-term, we set specific goals and objectives, it gives the citizenry a sort of matrix to measure the performance and measure the output of some of these initiatives. So I'm in agreement with what you are saying, but I'm also in agreement because I know you're well researched. We've spoken, and I know your presentations are not just off the cuff. It's because you have information that is supported by empirical data. A good opportunity now for law enforcement is to listen to some of these conversations that we are having at the national level, and to recognize that you need to have performance indicators. It's not just about setting up an initiative. You need to set goals and objectives measured over a timeline that can be monitored and looked at by the citizenry so that we can be quite pleased and satisfied that it is working or that it is not working, and what we need to consider again, probably as an alternate. So I'm in agreement. Yes, we need to see more effort on the efficacy of some of these initiatives that can be measured by the citizenry to prove its worth and to prove its accessibility.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garvin Heerah, and thank you for taking time out to join State of Affairs, and we look forward to inviting you back quite soon to speak on other matters.
Sure, it was an honor, and I need to compliment you guys for raising the conversation. It's vital and it's important for public awareness and public education. So do have a good show. God bless and stay safe.
Thank you.